welcome to our webinar on how to engage buyers and sellers at every stage in the customer journey in your digital marketplace. I'm just going to introduce myself and Jeff will get to introduce himself. So I'm Sigrid. I work as a global marketing manager for Besedo. At Besedo, we do content moderation for online marketplaces. And the reason we feel that we are capable of talking about engagement is that we have helped our customers for 16 years building quality content that has helped get people to buy, convert, and retain people. Jeff, do you want to quickly take it away?
So first of all, very excited to be presenting here today with Sigrid. Besedo is a very innovative company, and we're excited to partner with them on this. So we're here today to talk about customer engagement throughout the journey. And what's interesting to consider is that that journey is actually remarkably similar for buyers and sellers. It's acquisition and onboarding, conversion, post-transaction support, retention, and then referral. Very important. We want our users to share their good experiences with other people. Interesting part about this is that buyers can be sellers and vice versa, and it's very fluid. So as a marketplace, you have to be able to context switch between buyer and seller in a very dynamic fashion. And this is where traditional CRM and marketing automation systems really fall down, because in those old systems, they bucket you into you're a buyer or a seller, and it's very difficult to segment and then manage the same person in different contexts. So my name is Jeff Nolan, and I'm with Kahuna. I lead marketing for Kahuna. And I'll simply say that I joined this company precisely because I am the buyer for it. Like, I understand why this makes a difference, and I'm very excited to be here working with our customers all over the globe. Next slide, please. So let's start by talking about a marketplace and what is it? And this is actually a really interesting question to ask people, because once you get beyond buyers and sellers, it's kind of like, well, it also does this or this or this, and it's very different. And if you operate a classifieds marketplace, you may not consider yourself a marketplace. You may consider yourself a portal, which is not a marketplace, or you may consider yourself, a transportation hub, for example, a ride-sharing hub. All of these things are actually marketplaces, and this is why. Disparate buyers and sellers is kind of a given, right? If you don't have multiple buyers and multiple sellers, you're not a marketplace. More importantly, if you just have one seller, you're just an e-commerce site. So this whole notion of fragmentation in a market is very important. The more buyers and more sellers you have, the more fragmented your market is, and the more activity you're likely to see as a result of that. So fragmentation in this context is actually a very good thing. Trust is the product. This is something that we spend a lot of time talking with our customers about, because what does a marketplace actually sell, right? Well, it brings buyers and sellers together, but ultimately the one thing that every successful marketplace has is this notion of trust. As a seller, if I don't trust you're going to bring quality buyers to me, or the buyers that you do bring to me are going to, create payment problems or customer service, or they're going to abandon their shopping carts at very high rates, I'm not going to be inclined. I don't trust you as a marketplace. Similarly, if as a buyer, the issue of trust should be self-evident, right? If I don't believe that your sellers are legitimate, are going to care for me as, in the manner that I deserve, then I'm not going to buy through your marketplace. So
I think it's actually funny, Jeff, because when we talked about this, one of the things I was like popped into mind, we also talked so much about trust with our clients. Like, it's the main thing that they are interested in. It's the whole, building of trust on the platform. And so, yeah, I back this up 100%.
Yeah, and I think that in your case, it couldn't be even more important, right? Because trust is what you facilitate, which actually leads to the third notion of autonomous value. And this is one that gets a little wonky and academic, but the concept is really simple, which is, if all you do as a marketplace is match buyers and sellers together and process a transaction, it's very likely that you're going to see a lot of leakage in your network, meaning people going offline to conduct their transaction. Because as a seller, why should I go and conduct business through your marketplace and pay a fee for it if all you're doing is giving me the same buyers I'm already selling to? So this notion of autonomous value is, as a marketplace, you have an obligation to provide more value to both your buyers and your sellers. In the case of sellers, Sigrid, your point on trust is really important, because you are an example of autonomous value that a marketplace provides to its sellers and to its buyers, right? Because the content goes both ways. Somebody is consuming it as well as relying on it. We also see like shipping and logistics, payment processing, tax processing is a big one. On the buyer side, reviews, returns processing, again, shipping, and multiple payment options are all examples of autonomous value. So as a marketplace, you have to instill trust, but you also have to provide additional products and services that keep your buyers and your sellers coming back. Next slide, please.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
So this whole notion of industry, global marketplaces, it is global. And Kahuna, 7 of the world's #1 marketplaces rely on Kahuna. So we see this. Actually, we're a fascinating example of a tech company in Silicon Valley in that most of our customers are actually located internationally, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and Europe. It's kind of, personally for me in my professional journey, it's kind of a new thing and it's very exciting. So the growth here is staggering when you look at the evolution of marketplaces, and it is the natural evolution of e-commerce. There's a couple of stats I'm going to call out that are not on the slide. In Q2 of 2018, Amazon, in their quarterly shareholder report, revealed something actually pretty fascinating. Over 50% of the merchandise transactions that Amazon conducted were actually fulfilled by third-party sellers. What that means is most of the stuff that Amazon sold didn't actually get shipped from an Amazon distribution warehouse. The other part of this that got my attention is they disclosed that the gross margins on third-party seller were 9%. The gross margin on the stuff that they were shipping themselves was 3%. So not only is this whole notion of a marketplace growing in its share of retail, it's actually more profitable for marketplace operators than traditional retailers, which is kind of why we see in the physical retail world this whole store within a store concept emerging in physical retail. We're seeing that online now as well. So the net is there's no sign or no indicator that global marketplace growth is slowing, and what we can expect is that traditional media, traditional retail, as well as digital exclusive mobile and app vendors are going to be making a greater push here.
And I like that you get to be kind of the good cop, because now I get to be the bad cop here. So that is a lot of positive news, right, for all of us operating in the marketplace industry. But at the same time as there's happening a lot of growth, there's also happening a lot of competition. And one of the things that we have seen is that there's a lot of new niche sites that are coming out now, but there's also the big tech giants like Google, like Microsoft, who bought LinkedIn, like Facebook, who put out a Facebook Marketplace, which everyone, of course, are aware of, who are coming in and wants to have part of all of this, because it's all about, the whole networking effect and being part of all of that. And what people are buying and selling is obviously hugely valuable to the data that they can pull and use. And so what do we do in the marketplace industry to combat this and to make sure that we can actually still exist in 2, 3, 5 years from now, when we have these enormous companies with an already established network effect present? And so one of the things that we have talked, you and me, about is the opportunities that are actually there, because it's not all doom and gloom. There are a lot of opportunities, because Facebook and Google and all of these big companies, they are not focusing on marketplaces specifically. That's not their core product. That's kind of an addendum to what they're doing. So one of the things that you can do is you can capitalize on a customer-focused user experience. And what you do, like when was the last time you talked to a Facebook customer support agent, Jeff? That doesn't happen, right? Like if you have a problem on Facebook and you want to reach out to them, it's really, really hard to get in touch with an actual human being. So already there, you have an opportunity to make your site a lot more personalized and a lot more, this near connection, this community feel, that you're there for the customer. The second thing is that you can embrace the engagement-focused design. Facebook is great, Google is great, but they are not marketplace players in that sense. It's not their core product. That's not their focus. You guys who are listening in now, you probably worked in this industry for years and years and years. You know the type of segment you have. You know the journey that they are taking. You know all of these things. So you can make sure that you make your user journey throughout the site as engaging and as smooth as possible. And that's another opportunity you have to differentiate yourself. And the last thing, and Jeff, you touched a little bit about this before when you were talking about taxes and stuff like that. It's the add-ons that you can put onto your service. So one of them, of course, is what most companies in the marketplace industry are already doing, is that they are trying to facilitate the transaction. So you pay through the site, or you pay through some sort of vendor connected within the site. Facebook Marketplace, at least in Europe, I know that they're experimenting a little bit with Facebook Pay in the US, but at least in Europe and a lot of other areas, it's still not actually a marketplace, because one of the definitions of marketplaces is that you can do the whole transaction online without ever having to meet the person. But Facebook, you have to, at least here in the marketplace, you talk to the person who wants to buy it, and then you have to actually go and deliver it and meet the person and hand over, maybe not cash, you can probably use another payment system, but you have to be there. Whereas on marketplaces, what you can do if you want to differentiate yourself is that you can facilitate the transaction, you can do financing, you can do insurance, and all of the things that Jeff mentioned previously. So here are three of the opportunities that I think you guys can bank on in order to make yourself competitive when you look at these competitives that comes up now.
Well, and I think this, when you specifically talk about Facebook and Google, there's a bigger elephant in the room, as we say, around trust, right? And given their well-documented challenges with content moderation, this has to have had frustrated their ambitions in this area. Now they're playing, to their credit, they play very long games, and I see them making progress with like online dating, which is, I guess, ironically another form of marketplace, and in jobs as well. So I think that their ambitions are, incremental, and again, playing a very long game. But recent developments with both of those companies surely are going to create great challenges for them in this area, when content moderation is such a critical and integral part of the entire successful marketplace operation.
And they really haven't nailed it. Like, they have tried since, I don't know if you know, just a segue, but there was a huge controversy when they banned the Napalm Girl image, which was, they then had to excuse their actions and had to unban it. But that was back in, I think, 2016. And that's 2 years ago, and they still haven't nailed it. And there's a lot of other things, popping up with the trust issues all the time. And it's obviously, it's a huge challenge, but I think that's part of it as well. They are so huge that it's hard for them to nail this. So now that we have kind of established the world we live in, so to speak, when Jeff and I were talking about doing this webinar, what we said is, okay, so how can you, like, what's the problem with engagement? What's the problem with how people think about engagement? And one of the problems is that people tend to think about it in like as just a big box. Okay, we need to engage our customers. But as Jeff also mentioned, there is both buyers and sellers, so it's quite a challenging, it's quite a challenge to do that for marketplaces. And also, there's different steps and different actions that you have to take throughout the user journey. You can't just be engaging in the onboarding phase and then say, okay, now we did it, we got the customers on board. No, we have to be all the way. So here, I just quickly wanted to go over the definition. So we said onboarding is when you first land on the site and you start wanting to use the actual platform. Then you have site users. That's for buyers. That would be when they start browsing for the items they want to buy, and all the way up until they actually click the buy button. And for sellers, it would be when they start the whole process of uploading their ads and decide, now I want to sell. So that's kind of the site users for them. And then there's the post transaction, and that's, I think, I don't know if you agree, Jeff, but it's equally important to make sure that you have engagement, or maybe even more important to have engagement in the post transaction, to make sure that these guys do not just become one-time sellers, but they actually come back and then re-engage with your platform over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we will go through each of these areas one by one, and we will give you a couple of methods that you can apply. And then there's, of course, a lot of other strategies. And as I said, we're going to send you a checklist afterwards, and they will go more in depth with the different strategies as well, even the ones that we haven't gone into in this webinar. So make sure that you check that out afterwards. So on the customer onboarding slide here, it's I want to start by saying that first impressions matter. First impressions matter a lot, and this is something that we see a lot when we've done a couple of studies, and every time we do studies, we find that it's really, really important what happens the first time people load up your page. It's that's when you catch them. That's when you go, okay, it's the same as, window shopping for stores, right? If you go past the store and it's kind of missing items in the window, it's dusty in there, you're not going to want to go in there. You're not even going to consider going in and putting your money on the desk. And that's the same thing for online marketplaces. You have to have a good storefront. And one of the things that we've decided to pull out here is that if you have a main page where it's clear that some of the items there are fraudulent, then people are not going to trust you at all. They're not even going to consider using your site. What we saw is that it's not just the buyers who are not going to buy from it. So you can see 60% of them would not actually buy from anyone on your entire marketplace, but it's also the people who are coming there to want to sell. They don't want to be associated with people who scam. And as you can see, these two numbers go hand in hand, right? And it makes sense that the sellers does not want to sell on your marketplace because they are unlikely to get buyers because there's other people on the platform scamming users. So one of the things that you can do just to ensure that you get that initial acquisition is that you can make sure that your front page and of course when you're searching through the different listings does not have any scams at all.
Yeah, and this first impression actually is not a new concept, right? I mean, you walk into a store and everybody working in the store is busy and doing things and they don't acknowledge you, you feel that, right? It immediately creates a negative impression that then the store has to overcome. If somebody looks up, if they're busy, they look up from what they're doing and says, hey, welcome, good morning, good afternoon, I'll be with you in a second, you instantly feel comforted. And I think in an online marketplace, this whole notion of personalization goes to an extreme because in some cases we know exactly who you are. In others, you're an unknown. Our journey starts with an unknown user converting into a known user. And personalization is only enabled when we do that. So we got to do everything that we can within the website or the app itself, because again, a lot of e-commerce happening through marketplaces is driven by apps, especially in like Asia Pacific. We need to personalize that. In addition to personalization, product recommendations drive engagement, right? If you can get a signal from somebody based on what they're searching for, you have a great opportunity to give them related search. If you give them a related search that is the same item listed, 18 times, their trust in you goes down. So again, be smart about related product searches. This is an area where I think Amazon actually falls down. You go and you look at a listed item in Amazon and boom, you really do get 15 of the same items from other sellers, often at the same prices as well. So I think, product recommendations can go obviously beyond just the product you're buying. It also, you can build a knowledge base or, I guess a corpus of products, a taxonomy of products that are somehow related by category or usage, and that can get pretty detailed over time.
And then quite interesting, Jeff, what you're saying with the kind of the duplicate recommendations, because that's something that we have talked to a lot of clients about who are really looking to remove at least duplicate images, but in general, whenever people try to put the same item on their platform multiple times, they don't want that because their buyers are not enjoying that experience. And so I completely agree with that. It's really important to give product recommendations are great, and that's one of the things that your platform does really well, but it also has to be really good product recommendations.
And then this whole notion of getting to that first magic moment, right, that first transaction, is really well understood for a new customer. But I'm going to introduce a variable here that may not seem like an onboarding topic, but it's the reacquisition of a customer who's drifted off. And we talk about this in the context of churn all the time, but sometimes it really is just as simple as they're not actively leaving you, they're passively leaving you. They just haven't used your site or service in a while. And I have one customer case study that I want to bring forward, which is Curb. Curb's a ride-hailing app. It's kind of the taxi industry's answer to Uber and Lyft. A very popular app. If you need a cab, you bring up Curb, and call a cab, and it basically manages the customer interaction much like ride sharing services. They use Kahuna, and one of the things that they did is they actively segmented their users according to usage frequency. And in the case where people had not used the Curb app in over 30 days, they treated it like a new customer acquisition and onboarding, a re-onboarding again. And using Kahuna with personalized messaging and really smart interaction through multiple channels, they were able to get a 2,900% increase.
Wow.
So 29x improvement in rides booked for customers who had not used the app in 30 days over those who had just drifted back naturally. So we see the lesson here is when you actively engage these customer segments according to their behaviors, who they are and where they are, you can drive significant returns for your business.
Yeah, no, I know it from personal experience. I was looking for a lampshade at some point on one of these apps, and I didn't find what I was looking for, and then I forgot about it, and then they smartly started sending me personalized messages with lampshade suggestions, and I ended up getting a lampshade I think 3 months later.
Yeah, and the best sites, the best marketplaces, I think, are also doing a lot of work around shopping cart abandonment. They're remembering shopping carts, and when you've left the app or you've left the site without completing your transaction, their job isn't finished, so they're going to keep on that, and it works.
Yeah. So let's move on. I know that you have something smart to say here.
Yeah, well, so this is really the meat and potatoes, right? It's like you're on, and I'm going to get you to buy something. And this is, again, we have a lot of customers in Asia Pacific, and in this context, in this region, it's very often to occur exclusively through a mobile device. And this is pretty exciting because of the ability of a mobile device to not only capture location, but then also imagery. So an example that I'll use is Carousel. Carousel is a very large classifieds marketplace, leading marketplace in Singapore. And they approach this with a laser focus on getting sellers listing an item. And they have a metric that they measure, and I'm going to just, to be precise, I'm going to read this off. So using a smartphone, their sellers should be able to take a picture, post, and list an item in under 30 seconds. And over time, their goal is to get that down 10x to 3 seconds. So think about that for a second, right? What does that mean? Think about listing an eBay item in 30 seconds. Good luck, right? If you do it, let us know, because we don't think that's possible. In order to do that, you have to have really smart technology on the back end to facilitate this whole seller conversion, right? Bringing a seller online and listing an item. That's product listing, categorization, pricing help. I mean, a lot of the things you struggle with as a seller is, what should I call my item? How should I describe it? And how do I price it, right? If you help the seller based on your vast experience across your entire marketplace, one, you're providing this notion of autonomous value. You're giving them a real service, but you're also making them competitive. Making sellers competitive increases the fragmentation in your market, which drives the overall gross merchandise value of that marketplace up over time. So that's a very important point. Buyers, instinctively we focus on buyers, but I'm here to tell you that focusing on your sellers is just as important, because without your sellers, you don't have buyers. And your sellers actually are your highest value customers over time.
Agreed. Yeah, and just to add to that, something that we have been talking now, everyone is aware of this, but a couple of years ago we were starting talking to our clients about time to site. You need to make that ad not just smoothen down the kind of ad listing process, but you also make sure that it goes live really, really fast, because people expect that. They don't want to sit for half an hour or 2 hours or even 12 hours like it was back in the day to wait for someone to go through the ad and make sure it's okay and then publish on the site. They want it to be there instantaneously. So with the help of AI, that's something we've managed to, now it's almost instant, right? But that's something to think about already now. If you have a process that is very heavy on manual work, it's gonna be like a bad or worse experience for the seller as well, because they have to not only take a lot of time, listing everything and figuring, as you said, figuring out a good headline, etc., and then they have to also wait for someone on the back end to make sure that their listing is okay, and then go out on the site. So this is one of the reasons that we are really trying to push automation to our clients, making sure that it's not taking a lot of time before the seller can actually see the value of using your app.
Yeah, I would imagine
And
in your case it's actually pretty extreme, because if you require any kind of round trip latency, your customers are going to get frustrated and leave their site. So real time is not just a nice to have, it's a must have in your case.
And especially for mobile phones, right? Like people, when they have a mobile phone, they expect everything to go immediately. When they're at a desktop computer, they might be a little bit more lenient because they're sitting and talking to and watching a movie on the other screen. But on a mobile phone, you want it to happen right now and on the go.
Yeah.
So just I don't know if you were done, Jeff, but otherwise I want to.
We can move on.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say quickly here that in marketing, we are talking a lot about the hook, and the hook is what makes people actually stop out and go, wow, okay, I need to pay attention here. And that's the same thing for marketplaces, right? If you want people to buy your inventory, you need to have hooks. You need to make sure that people are actually seeing good quality content when they're browsing through it. And I would say even try and encourage your users to write interesting descriptions for your items. They need to be super precise, but they should also be interesting so that people actually go, oh, okay, wow, I want to own this shirt or boot or bike or car. So that's one thing. Like, make sure that the inventory you have, and it's completely out of your control. That's what's a little bit scary. It's obviously cool because you're not as risk adverse. You don't have the inventory and the money invested in that, but at the same time, you don't have any control either. So try to make sure that you encourage your users to have really good descriptions for the items, really good images as well. Because what we have seen is that people will, the buyers, and they will really go in and look at the pictures and go, okay, so there's two sites here I could use, but this one has better pictures. Well, I'm going to go with that one. That's from a study we did. And also they are much more inclined to buy the items that are for sale if when they look at it, they have a good impression of what they're actually going to get on the other side. And one thing that we've done for a client is that we have been ranking or labeling the pictures from high quality, medium quality, and low quality images. And then the client was then using that to decide which images they should push. And I guess that could really work well with your personalization machine. Because if you label the good content as high, and then you use that as kind of, okay, so these are the ones that we should push through our personalization, that would make it a lot more effective, I would assume.
Yeah, and I think that's where user-generated images actually can really fill in that gap, because you can't always anticipate how your product is going to be used. And if an end user can post pictures of it in use, that actually is a huge value. I have a personal story from the last couple of days about the importance of pictures. And I didn't think about it until you were just talking, but I'll share it now. So my wife and I, we have one of those Bose radios in our bedroom, and the display over time, it's been a great product, but the display over time has just gotten dim to the point where you can't even see it anymore. So I needed a new alarm clock, which is actually kind of funny because I wake up at the same time every day without an alarm clock, but it's just the comfort of having an alarm clock, I think, matters.
That alarm clock.
So I go on and I'm looking, I'm like, God, there's so many options. All I want is a simple alarm clock, right? Just, that I can see across the room, boom, that's all I needed. And I actually found a couple, and I ended up buying one. And I hated this alarm clock because the buttons were weird. It's like setting it up was all the menus. They said it was easy to set up, and I thought, well, yeah, if you have about 4 hours to learn all of the code that they generate. And then the weird thing was the buttons on the back were non-intuitive at all. So I said, okay, I'm going to replace this because I only spent like $20 on it. So I'm like, I'm just going to buy a new one. So I go on and I'm looking for alarm clocks, and actually I'm not looking at the front of the alarm clock at all like I was in my first purchase. The only thing I was interested in is, what does the back look like? What do the buttons look like? And what was funny is nobody posts pictures of the back of an alarm clock.
No.
And it was actually really frustrating to me at the time, and I thought, oh great, I'm going to have to buy another $20 alarm clock to find out I hate it. Eventually by the fourth or fifth one, I'll find one I like.
So did you end up getting a good alarm clock?
Well, I I ordered one. It ended up being $40, which made me feel
Oh,
really
wow.
like, I'm like, God, I feel like I just blew my budget on alarm clocks for the next 10 years. But the buttons are on the front, which was the winning feature. I'm like, I don't really care about the rest of it. I just want to know where the buttons are.
I think that's this actually transition was very well into the last slide here on the customer journey, which is about the post transaction, right? Because one of the things that is really really important is to make sure that the item you see is actually the item that you get. This
Yeah.
is imperative to get people to actually return, because if they buy something from your side and it's not what they believe that they were getting, whether it's because it's a counterfeit, for instance, that's something that we struggle, or we help our clients with a lot, or if it's just not living up to the description, then people are going to be super upset about it. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this, but I recently sold an item on a classified site or a marketplace, and I thought I had put a lot of thought into it, and I had actually taken pictures from all angles about it, and I was listing, when it was from, it was a computer, when it was from, how much it had been used, etc., etc., etc. And I thought I had made it very clear that this was an old computer. It was probably only going to be useful for writing on. And I got a lot of people contacting me about this, and someone was the quickest one to say, I'm buying this. I had it out very cheap because obviously it was just a glorified typewriter. And so I get to the transaction with him. It was a face-to-face transaction, and he looks at it and he's like, but that one can't play Fortnite. And I'm like, no, it can't. It's a 10-year-old laptop. No, it can't. But so I think, and this is something that we see a lot. Like that guy may or may not come back to the classified site. He may have been super disappointed or not. He didn't spend the money on it. Obviously, I took it back. But what we see is that if you have a really good quality description and really good images that actually showcase the item, then you have a 2 times higher likelihood of creating return visitors, because then they get the item they want. They have, they have already been through the entire process and they know it works. That's the main thing. Yeah, I think that's just the key. Make sure that your users are making very very sure that what they are putting out there is also what they're actually selling. So this is one of the reasons we're telling our clients not to let them use stock photos, for instance, because it's never going to be as on the stock picture.
Well, I think in many cases, marketplaces are the post-transaction messaging forward as a customer service experience rather than what it is, which is you want to get people to do something else and get them back in. And this is like a dopamine effect. They do something successful, and you want them to do it again. This is where personalization again makes a huge difference, because when a user successfully posts a listing that prompts them, you prompt them to do something else, you actually can get them at that moment of euphoria to then do something else on the site. But it only works if you actually know what you did and you're communicating with them as an individual, not as a generic user in some segment that you thought was important when you first set up a marketplace.
Yeah, Jeff, you're falling out a little bit, but I think I got the message there. I hope everyone else got it as well.
Yeah, there's some feedback.
Yeah, there we go. So I just want to remind everyone before we go into the next final slides, ask your questions at the right-hand side. I can see there's a couple who has popped in already. If you have anything you want to ask Jeff and me, make sure that you put it in there, and we will try and be quick about it. So just before we end this presentation, we just wanted to give you 3 kind of main takeaways that you can consider now. And Jeff, do you want, and after this, we're going to just quickly look at the poll results, and then we'll take a Q&A session. So Jeff, do you want to start this off?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot we've talked about today. We're running a couple minutes over, so I'm going to be really brief and just simply say, you have to know who your buyers are. You have to understand their purchasing behavior, transaction size, lifetime value, and much more, right? You have to do all of that. That's a given. But then you got to manage those segments really dynamically based on what they're doing at that moment in time, not what they did with you historically. And it's when you get that, when you have that level of personalization, that's driven by the signals that they're sending you, you can get a big uplift, not just in return visits and return transactions, but also in the transaction size. So we talk a lot about treating buyers and sellers dynamically based on what they're doing at that moment in time, and how you have them tagged is going to drive the outcome that's beneficial for you as a marketplace. Buyers want personalization. Give your sellers the ability to communicate with your buyers directly, right? And encourage them. When a buyer sends a message to a seller, if that message isn't responded to, you as a marketplace have an obligation to step in and be the traffic cop to route that, make sure that it is getting the attention it deserves. Because again, the one product that your marketplace is delivering on is trust. And if your buyers don't have trust in your sellers, they're not going to buy from you. So, personalized messaging, multiple channels, being able to deliver them the messaging, or I should say messages through the channel that they're most likely to use is another one. We have the ability to determine if a user prefers using their iPad between the hours of 6 and midnight versus their laptop between the hours of 7 and 4, right? So we could deliver a message through the right channel at the right time.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I just want to hammer home is that your inventory quality matters. It matters a lot. It matters for, it's kind of the foundation for doing any other engagement creating activities, that you have good quality content that you can present for your buyers and your sellers as well, so that they become, because buyers, as you said before, can also be sellers and the other way around, so that they kind of become inspired to sell their own things on your marketplace. You need to make sure that they are surrounded by good quality. So I'm completely on board with all of the personalization technology that you guys are capable of creating. I think it's amazing and much needed for marketplaces to be able to compete. And I think what we can help our clients with is making sure that they have the quality of content on inventory that they can then actually leverage the power that your technology is capable of. So as I said, let's just quickly share the results of the poll before we go into the rest of the presentation and the questions. There's a couple of more questions coming in, so keep the questions coming, guys. It's super cool. You are engaging. Yeah. So here's the results of the poll, and the interesting thing I think is that the top, or the three first ones are really close, right? Super close. But customer acquisition is winning, and I guess that's a in general problem that, or challenge that most companies are facing, right? So it maybe not that big of a surprise, but it's yeah. Well, so I know that you have a poll, a survey that you did around this. Do you want to talk a little bit around that?
Yeah, so the question actually came out of a survey that we've done globally. We surveyed 1,200 people, 100 different marketplaces, and the results are pretty consistent with what we're seeing here. New product and service was, new product and service was actually the first #1 response, but the new product, service, revenue, and customer acquisition were pretty tightly bound as the top 3 answers, and margin improvement and competitive positioning. Competitive positioning, ironically, 38%. That actually was 38 in our poll, was also 38%. Yeah, so I think our audience here today has similar concerns with that which we surveyed, which is very reassuring, gives me confidence in our overall poll. Thank you.
Yeah, you know what, I mean, just a quick note on this. When I first saw these results, I was a little bit confused that competitive positioning is so low, but now that I think about it, it's very tied to customer acquisition, right? If you get customer acquisition, you're also kind of positioning you better competitively, and so I guess a lot of it was soaked up by this one. So I'm just gonna
surprised me about our survey, and we didn't include the response on the GoToWebinar poll, but geographic expansion actually rated very low across the board. And I think that which is interesting, because new product and service launch is very high. And what that tells me is people are more concerned about expanding into additional categories and offering additional services than they are growing geographically.
Yeah, and you know what, I think that ties into a lot with the amount of niche sites that are coming up. If you want to be competitive and you are a vertical, or sorry, a horizontal, then you need to actually come up with some good, strong categories in the places where you're being challenged. So I guess that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Which actually, and as you have, if you have high rate of customer acquisition, your ability then to expand into additional segments is more enhanced than if you start out with, a flat user base.
Yeah. So just before we come into, I promised everyone who joined this that this is not going to be a sales call. We don't want to do that. But just before we go into the questions, and thank you so much for keeping them coming, just 10 seconds why people should use Kahuna.
We personalize every seller and every buyer interaction for the world's leading marketplaces.
Yeah, and just 10 seconds from me as well, and then I promise we'll go into the questions. For us, it's that we enable engagement through dealing with toxic users and other bad content. We do that through AI, other automation techniques, and the expertise that we gained over the last 16 years working with global classifieds and online marketplaces. And that's all the sales talk you're going to get from us today. Now, we're going to go on to the questions. And so one thing I can see here is, let me just look through them. How can you help users create high quality titles, images, and listings? And how can you enforce this is one of the questions. So do you want to start, or should I start on this one, Jeff?
Well,
I can.
I think what's interesting is we're going to come at the same problem from two entirely different angles. And actually, your ability to enforce is probably much greater than my ability to enforce, because using Kahuna, so again, without digressing into a whole machine learning dissertation, I mean, at the end of the day, we see millions of listings across every possible category. We're a hosted service, so we see everything that's happening on our network. And what we also know is the results. How well do those listings perform? So when you look at the combination of words, the length, the emotion, the action in a product description, when you look at those attributes, you actually can predict with a relative degree of success how well a listing is going to perform. That doesn't mean that we then change it. And if we can make suggestions to a seller, but at the end of the day, the seller owns the listing, so we can't change it for them.
Yeah, I think that is a super cool ability for you, because you basically should be able to, with machine learning, go in and say, this is the perfect ad, this is the one that sells the most, right? What we can of course do is that, first of all, I just want to, high quality titles is something that you can create with technology, of course, as you mentioned before, Jeff. And what you can do is, we have AI that actually looks through and finds, if, for instance, you have bad words in it, if you have the wrong, like you can have a blacklist, and you can just say, we don't want this kind of word. Like one of the things that we work with is endangered animals and the puppy mill farms and stuff like that, and we know exactly how ads like that work. So we work with a lot of customers to try and prevent that type of ads to come up. And the other thing that we can do is that we can of course look through the images and make sure that they are of the quality that the clients want. And what you're saying is that you can actually go in and see what items are the ones that convert. What we can do is, you can give that data then to your client, and what we can go in and do with our services is we can go in and see that, okay, so these are the rules and the guidelines that the clients want based on what's actually converting and what's of course legal in their country and all of this. And we can, with our services and technology, then go in to make sure that the ads that come out live on the site are actually living up to what they want. I just want, there's a quick question here that I saw that I just want to answer really quickly. There's someone saying that they can't listen to the entire presentation, and if we will send a recording. Yes, we will send a recording. Kahuna will send that out, and we will also send a Kahuna a checklist coming for everyone who signed up. So don't worry, Sandra, you'll get everything. And then we have one from David who's saying, what are some key strategies for increasing the sellers on the marketplace? So I can start by saying, obviously there's, you you have to make sure that you have good marketing. This is not really something that we are invested in, but we have to make sure that you have good marketing campaigns. But the other thing is we had a you're welcome, Sandra. we had another webinar with a guy who had been doing SEO for junk mail in South Africa, and what he was saying that a lot of their strategy to attract both sellers and buyers was making sure that they had really good on-site SEO. And where, you know, making sure that they have the right categories, but also making sure that they have the right landing pages. And there's actually a place where we can help a lot, making sure that the content is good, so that you don't get penalized by Google for duplicate content, for instance, or similar things. So that's another thing. You can check that out on our resource page if you want to learn a little bit more about the SEO part. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Jeff.
So what we find when we work with our clients, one of the interesting observations we've had is that buyer and seller acquisition are really the same set of processes, but they're usually run by different groups within an organization. You know, account managers are responsible for sellers, marketing people are responsible for buyers. I'm not advocating that you should reorganize your company around a consolidated, you know, buyer and seller acquisition model, but you have to treat your seller acquisition as another form of marketing. But it's more than just the acquisition, it's the seller onboarding. Because getting a seller to sign up is, you know, it's only 10% of the battle. It's getting them to get to that first transaction that's going to keep them coming back. And your whole goal with the seller is not to have them list one thing or one service, it's to do it repetitively, make it an integral part of their business. And I think you have to step back and put yourself into the shoes of a business owner, an operator. They have many competing demands on them on any given day. You know, if you think about in your own professional life, the amount of email, calls, you know, other things that you get distracted with on a daily basis, it makes it very challenging to focus on just one thing. And if you make it easy, if you personalize that interaction with the seller, if you drive them to that magic moment of having a first listing, a first transaction, if you help them with the buyer and seller interaction, right, to drive good post-transaction service, you know, you're going to get them coming back. And it's through that successful conversion of sellers that you're going to get more of them, because they're going to tell, they're going to be a reference for you. They'll be a referral for you that'll drive far more activity than your own marketing will.
Yeah, and the same with buyers as well. If they have a good you know, experience through your site, then they will be, oh, that guy earned money easily. I can do that too. We are way over time. I'm sorry, guys. I will take one last question, and I'll try to make it a good one. 1 second, and then I'll close this down. But what we will do is that we will Jeff and I will try and answer all the questions, and we will send those to you as well in a blog post or something like that afterwards. So don't worry, if you have any questions, last minute questions, you can throw them in now as well, and we will make sure that we answer it by text. But one last question, because I thought it was quite good. You guys haven't really talked about, this is from Philip, by the way, you guys haven't really talked about direct messages between buyers and sellers. I think we touched upon that, but let's go. So how do you think this can affect the overall engagement and trust with the marketplace? Do you want to start, Jeff?
Well, our technology absolutely enables this. You know, the direct messaging between buyers and sellers is, you know, a reason why we exist. We did this for traditional e-commerce originally, and now with our focus on marketplaces, we've expanded on that. I think, so first, it does drive positive results. There's no scenario where that direct engagement is a negative. I think that sellers can get a little spammy at times, and there is a potential for negative consequence to that. And I see this, like, for example, on Amazon, you know, when you buy something and then they keep pinging you to review it because reviews are so popular. Well, there's a point at which I'm not going to review a product, and if you just keep emailing me 6 times, I'm really not going to review it. So I think this is where you know, a platform, the marketplace platform, and then additional services like Kahuna provides are really, you know, are the road cops here. We're helping your sellers not only have, you know, personalized direct messaging, but we're also helping you have good messaging. And the last point is when a buyer messages a seller, yeah, you got to get on that. And I think one of the surprising things we've seen is the prevalence of sellers who are non-responsive to buyers in a marketplace. And that's just a kiss of death. You cannot allow that to happen on your marketplace. It drives people away because they lose trust in you as a platform.
Yeah, I just want to quickly step in here and say there's no case where it's negative. I agree, as long as it's it's running its course in the way it should be. But what we have actually seen is that, and it is a huge possibility. Every marketplace should have a chat. That's a given. But what we have seen is that people can get very emotional when it comes to buying and selling items, and we are actually seeing harassment happening in one-to-one chats where people are starting calling each other names or even being racist. And that's, of course, where we can step in and help. And one thing that we have started to push it, rather than having someone manually sitting and going through all of these conversations when they are reported, put in AI, because then you're also getting past the whole privacy issue where people don't like that people are spying on them in order to keep them safe. So that's something that we talk to our customers quite a lot about. Make sure that you have some filters in place, at least on your chat, so that the worst harassment is taken away. And then, of course, it's not often it happens, but it happens more often than I think most people realize. Yeah, so I just wanted to put that in.
My kids play online games, and you're starting to see that AI technology show up in the chat channels and games as well. And so maybe what that's going to end up doing is conditioning people to not just accept it, but embrace it.
Yeah. No, I think most people would rather be protected than have to deal with people calling them names or being generally unpleasant to them. I think I'll stop here. There's a lot of, well, not a lot. There's quite a lot of other questions that we don't get around to doing. But as I said, we will sort that out by text, and we'll send it to you guys so you don't miss that. If you were one of the people asking, I'm sorry we didn't get it to the live session. It was super fun talking to you, Jeff. I really enjoyed this. I hope we can do something else. And thank you to everyone who attended today. It was really nice to be able to talk about engagement with you guys. And if you want to talk to either of us or our companies, you can either reach out to us on any of these addresses, or you guys have a direct mail to me at least as well, and I can forward you Jeff's if you want it. So thank you.
Thank you, Sigrid. I echo that. This was super fun, and I suspect we could have just had an ongoing all-day long webinar where people could drop in and out, because I don't think there's any shortage of things we could talk about.
No, it doesn't seem like it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.